Chloe Drew says, "Hi, my name's Chloe. I'm a game art student from UK. Would be grateful if you could check out my unfinished ZBrush model I sent to you and give me some feedback/advice. Started using ZBrush 4 months ago. Mostly self-taught since my university college doesn't really teach ZBrush. Found your YouTube tutorial super helpful. Awesome. This is my first ever full character model. I would really appreciate any feedback on the anatomy, the geometry, or anything that needs improving before I go any further. Any tips on where to go next would be really handy. Retopping, projection, alright. Goals to sculpt, texture, rig, pose, and render this character, so the full shebang. Let's see. Model topology wasn't very good. For the hands, no worries. Just starting out and have a lot more to learn, but would love to become a character modeler. Very cool, Chloe. Alright, and I believe that is it. Alright, so you mentioned there general tips on just anatomy and tips on how to move forward from here. So anatomically speaking, I think, you're obviously going for a stylized anatomical figure here. I think that goes without saying. Actually, before I mention that, because you sent me a ZBrush project file, I would like to give you a little tip here. I don't know if you have ever saved a tool before, but I would encourage you to go up here into Tool and click on Save As, and save your future files as ZTools. The file size is about 1/10 of a ZBrush project, and the ZBrush project file that you included for me here does have undos, but in truth, I don't really think you need them. I don't think it's really that necessary. Typically what I do, if I need, not really undos, but kind of stages, I save in some form of version control. So for me, every time I do like some big major change, I'll save out a new like numbered version of that file, character 5, character 6, etc. Just as some quick version control, so you can just save out a couple files here. So if you do make something that's like a really big mistake for any reason, or you delete something on accident, you can always roll back. So again, ZTools, check them out, save as that. It's gonna save you a ton on your file, and you won't have extra geometry and stuff like this stuck in your file that's just kind of clogging it up as you work forward. But let's go ahead with that out of the way. With that said, let's move forward on taking a look at your character. Again, you mentioned anatomy as well as just kind of like general changes and tips for moving forward and progressing from here. So typically the first thing that I like to do when I'm in this stage, I'm actually going to take your model and split it up a little bit. So I don't want your head connected to your body, especially because I typically work on these things separately. I also like to keep my arms separated from my body, and I think you'll also find this very helpful as working on the armpit area and just the shoulder girdle in general is a very tough area, and I think you're gonna have a lot of problems moving forward, at least in this stage where you are right now, if that's all connected up. So what I recommend for you moving forward from here would be to start combining some of your geometry. Some of your proportions and forms here are a little wonky, but I would say for the most part, I would kind of push forward in this direction. So let's take a look at how we would do that. In terms of like wonkiness, the stuff that I'm talking about, from your profile, your character feels like it's leaning backwards and it's about to tip over back. So what I tend to do, draw a plumb line using your transpose line straight down your figure, and just try to get a feel for the balance of your character, as well as just looking at the profile with perspective off. That tends to help give you a little bit of a better view there as well. So after you do all that, and maybe we could very quickly like look at how you could fix that. So here, I'll just do a quick couple groups. Let's see, you got some hands here. You know what, let's just go into T-pose. Yeah, T-pose mesh. If you're unfamiliar with this tool, it's under the Z plugin Transpose Master. It concatenates all of your subtools into one tool, much like what I did right here. And what I'm going to do is use it to just do a quick mask for your entire body and just like slide it back a little bit. So it's feeling like the weight of the body is a little bit more underneath the character. Even a small change like that can make a world of difference to making your character not feel like it's gonna necessarily tip over. So after we've done that, we can just T-pose right on back. Again, that's up here, Z plugin, transpose master, T-pose sub T, throws everything back. Beautiful, beautiful. So that's just like a quick change. I don't think that'll take you too long. And in terms of these individual parts, I would say that you can correct a lot of this stuff as you move forward, but some of the stuff that I would look at is making sure that your forms are maintaining the, let's say maintaining the shape of the object that you want as you rotate around. So for instance, I think you have some good stuff going on in the silhouette of your legs. I think it's a little bit messy, but it doesn't really appear super messy until you start rotating around and seeing how some of these forms, like if we're looking at this front line of the silhouette, I'm obviously exaggerating this, but there's some stuff here that we probably want to correct and just work on and do a little bit of tweaking here and there. So I'm just gonna literally just use my move brush and start pushing and pulling some stuff around, maybe like a little bit of clay tubes, just kind of start softening. I'm also using my smooth brush. Like in here, there's a little bit of a weird hit going on. I think you could probably turn the edge of this leg a little bit earlier. We'll do in auto groups very fast, just so I can work on these. Whoops. So maybe you could, let me flip that. There we go. So maybe you could like turn that edge a little bit sooner. Up here in the stomach, the plane change here feels a little bit awkward as it like wraps out and bubbles around the stomach. But a lot of this stuff is stuff I think that you can just fix once you merge all these parts and pieces together, which again would be my next step, my recommendation for the next step after you spend just a little bit more time cleaning up these individual pieces. So after you're done doing that, what we could do is just kind of grab all this stuff and run a quick Dynamesh on this. The scale for this resolution should be fine, what you have in there by default. I think there are maybe some proportional changes that you could make to this as well, depending on the feeling and age and type of character that you're going for. But overall, I don't think there's too much wrong here that just like super really sticks out to me. I think you've done a pretty good job of just getting the blocked out shapes in there, but just like some minor cleanup here and there. So that resolution is just way too high. You also got something weird going on with your ZRemesher, I'm noticing. I recommend not using half or a lot of... I would pretty much only recommend using adaptive a lot of the time. The objective of ZRemesher is a lot of the time not to try to get some super clean high resolution topology. A lot of the time the benefits of ZRemesher come in actually simplifying your form. And you mentioned using projection and stuff like that, so I'll go ahead and show you an example of that using just a target poly count of 5, which essentially means 5,000 polys, and we'll do this to your body. So the way I'm going to do this, I have solo mode turned on. These objects are still visible. That's what that hotkey I'm pressing is. It's the G key for me. It's a custom hotkey that I've set up. But what you want to do is hold the shift key and just tap on your current subtool. That'll disable the visibility for all of your subtools. Click it again to make that eye icon turn back on. That means it's the only visible one. Duplicate it. Select that top one again. Let's scroll on down to ZRemesh. And I'm just going to ZRemesh this with the default settings, which is keep groups off and just using adaptive with a 5K resolution. You also want to make sure that your X symmetry is on for when you do this. So let's just click on ZRemesh and see what we get out of this real quick. So this will probably take a little bit because the Dynamesh resolution is a little high. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly do a quick re-Dynamesh on this, lower the Dynamesh resolution. That's a little bit better. Hopefully this ZRemesher will go a lot faster, which it looks like it's getting there. So we'll give that a second to run. and then we'll show you or look at some projection tips. I also released a new video on my YouTube channel not too long ago, maybe within the past 2 weeks, talking about projection. So even for something like this, I actually think this resolution is too high for the stage that we're in right now. So what I would actually do is maybe do something like 1,000 polys. When you use the ZRemesher poly count, target poly count, it's not going to hit extremely close to that because we have that little adaptive tick turned on there, and you pretty much always, I would say, want to keep that on. Not only that, but pairing that with using X symmetry, essentially it remeshes 1/2 of your object and then just mirrors it over to the other side. So this is much closer to what we're looking for at this stage. And with a quick dynamic subdiv to just press the D key and see what that would look like smooth, I think that's starting to shape up very nicely. And at this stage, I would actually not project the form from the high resolution different dynameshed pieces. It's just not really necessary at this stage. We don't really need that resolution. But for example purposes, I think we should look at it very quickly. Again, I would recommend that you check out the video that I mentioned on my YouTube channel. Very quickly, if I can find that one. ZBrush projection made easy. I just posted it a week ago. So definitely go check that out. I think that'll help you out. If I remember, I will try to put a link down in the description when I upload this to YouTube. But for projection, what we want to do is just add a subdivision level, Control D, project. So we're under Tool, Subtools, and Projection. We're going to click on that. And you can see here that it's projecting the form from this other visible mesh onto this one here. So I'll just do that a couple times, Control D, project, until I get to the desired level of resolution. But as I mentioned, for something like this, it's not really necessary because at this stage, our concern is staying low poly and working with the form as best as we can in these larger shapes. So I'm going to undo that, unfortunately. Not really unfortunately, we don't need it. We want to focus on the big boy shapes, the big shapes as we call them. So at this point, you've merged your geometry together, and what you want to do is start working on your areas of connection. So start working where your upper and lower legs sync together. Start looking at anatomy, even for stylized stuff. This is going to help you out a lot. Start working on, blending the connection for the hip area in terms of just like anatomical changes here. There's a lot that needs to happen for you to get to something that I think is going to be, more in line with what we would see with something from like a stylized Disney or Pixar character. Again, I don't really know exactly the style and appeal that you're aiming for, but I'll just assume, kind of based on what I'm seeing already, that that's kind of a little bit of the direction you're heading in. So take some time with it. Again, it's so important that you really do take your time in these early stages. Don't rush ahead. Just, stay low poly for as long as you can, I would say. We'll do the same thing up in the arms. I recommend that you do this with all of these different areas. So now you can start working on blending that deltoid into your upper arm. Start working on that. I would say don't have this excess kind of shoulder, not clavicle, but what's the your wing blade? I'm blanking. The spine of the blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. But what I recommend here for the form is that you actually just chop this off completely and just work on wrapping this form around the connection area for your torso. I think you're going to end up with a lot of problems the more you kind of cross that threshold into the back, into the scapulae. That's what I was thinking of. I don't know why. I'm saying so many things. It's too many words. I'm like, my mouth can't keep up. But yeah, I think just work on kind of connecting that well right here around the pit, and I think you'll be a lot better off. Again, there's a lot of room here for change, but just look at the reference and you will improve for sure. Thank you, Kitten, by the way, for the follow there. Let's continue on here. and look at some stuff that I would change in your face, because I think you specifically mentioned the face there, and who doesn't like to improve their faces? So let me just shift that around a little bit, and let's talk about a couple things here. The first thing that I noticed about your face is that it's feeling, in general, I think just a little awkward, and it's for many reasons. The first being that your face feels a little flat, in particular around your eyes. And I looked at your eyes and I was like, that's why, because you made your eyes actually flat. So what I recommend is that you try, instead of making these flat, I actually recommend that you try to get away with making round eyeballs. And it looks like you, oh, no, sorry, symmetry wasn't on there, so that was a little awkward. So I just like reinsert a new sphere. I'm just very quickly correcting yours to get them more rounded. And what this is going to do is it's going to force you to try to make this work. So your eyelids wrap and form around your eye, and it's also going to help you and force you to get more depth in areas like the corners of your eyes. I have tons of videos talking about eyelid order and just things that you want to keep in mind for working on the eye. I should, at this point, just make a 5-minute video specifically like, here are these things, because I mention it so often and it's like spread out across so many videos that I feel like I don't have one specific one that I can point people towards. But in general, you want to start working on that form, wrapping around that eyeball. I'm going to turn off your lashes there. And you also just want to work on the general shape of your eyeball. I think there's a lot of room here for improvement, but I would recommend looking up some references for eyes and just kind of figuring out where the kind of first hit of that upper eyelid is, as well as the lower hit. There's a ton of free content that you can find out there for, people talking about all this different stuff that I'm kind of mentioning here very quickly, but this is just one area that I think we want to try to work on and improve. In terms of and I mentioned this first because it was the first thing that I visually noticed here when I looked at your character's head. So it ends up, because you have these flat eyes, it makes this area of the face feel very flat, but that kind of blends and bleeds into the rest of this, ending up feeling very flat as well. So I would like you to work on depth in your face. Trying to round out a lot of these different forms. Maybe you can find some examples of what some other people have done on something like ArtStation for their stylized characters. Again, I don't think you mentioned that you had a specific reference that you were using, so maybe that would be a good direction for you next for your face. Try to get something a little bit more specific to reference for that. The other thing here, other than like depth feeling a little wonky, is that your jawline feels a little undefined. And I think for the style that you're going for here, you can get away with a lot, but I like to define a little bit more of my jaw. It also really helps me think about the roundness of my character's face. So for instance, we don't have any subdivs on this, but that's okay. So I like to bring a line here from the corner of the mouth, wrapping all the way up around my brow, and then of course, down into your nose area, which we'll mention here in just a little bit. But this helps you figure out just some of the kind of roundness of the face, but pairing that with a very undefined jaw right now, it just, from the profile, I think the shape really starts to break down and not really work too well. So again, what I recommend doing, taking a little bit of time, grabbing some ref, figure out that jawline a little bit better, and once you kind of nail that down a little bit more, I recommend dynameshing and merging all this stuff together for your neck and head, because then you can, of course, blend between these shapes and start connecting that up and getting that feeling a lot better. Nose. Nose feels a little big and stuck on. And what I mean by stuck on, like big in general, it just feels like a little bit larger than looks appealing. But the main thing here is that it feels a little stuck on. So when we create a form in its most basic shape, its most basic primary form, we want to retain that. So if you make a sphere for your head, awesome, we have a sphere. and then we shape that up to the silhouette of the head that we want. And this line coming down from the brow, I've cut this off so you can see, kind of flows right down here into the tip of that lip, right? But because of the way that we've kind of sculpted the nose here, it starts to pull the face forward and makes it feel like it's stretching forward. So my advice is that as you're starting to build up a secondary shape on top of something that you've already built, so a nose on a head, for instance, like here, we want to make sure that that primary form is still retained and looking good. So, because this is feeling like it's stretching forward, and that's like the natural thing that should happen as you're sculpting and smoothing and blending, you just got to be careful of this stuff. It's very easy for it to happen, especially here in ZBrush, so it's just something that we want to keep in mind. So maybe we can define and plane this out a little bit better. Looking here from the side, I'm just looking at the silhouette, thinking about how that's kind of wrapping down and around, and I think that's already starting to feel a bit better. It might be protruding a little bit more than we want around that area, but then after you kind of go back and redefine this shape and get it feeling really good, then you can start, working on your nose a little bit more and starting to get that to feel a little bit better. And after a few quick moves with our move brush, good pal the move brush, I think that's starting to shape up a little bit more nicely at this point. And I'm just using my pinch brush to kind of plane out some stuff really quick and get that headed in the right direction. I think you should spend quite a bit more time here than I just did, but I think you get the basic idea for what I'm saying here, for how to push forward on that a little bit more. So clean that up. I think we're lacking quite a bit of depth in a lot of these areas, so I think that's still something that, I would probably handle the primary shape first, so talking about depth in your face and working on that a bit more, and then I would start refining those secondary forms. In terms of your mouth, if you're unfamiliar with how to go about making a mouth bag, that's something that I would look at. I think it'll help you kind of get a nice crease a little bit better than what you have right here in the corners of your mouth. I think that'll kind of push you in the right direction. And maybe just like revisit some stuff here for the shape of your head. You're definitely going for like a more rounded style from what I can tell. And I don't know if that's intentional, again, because I don't have a reference for what you're kind of aiming at. But I think that just goes to say how important reference is. But if we want to keep the kind of general roundness that you have here, I would just say kind of define some of this a little bit better so you don't have any question marks floating about. You don't want anybody to look at anything and say, was this intentional? You want everything to feel like it's purposeful and kind of placed with intention. So those are a few of the things that I would say that you should look at in your face. I think that's enough to get you started and headed in the right direction. Again, the same stuff for the body. Just start combining your pieces, refine those shapes, keep them low poly, and yeah, I think you got a good start here, and I look forward to seeing what you do for the next steps. But good luck to you, Chloe.